Redditors who live in secluded towns, what is the darkest thing that has happened in your town but is kept a secret? In the early 1990s, a town in my small county in the southern U.S. had a fire in a chicken processing plant. When workers tried to escape, it became apparent that the fire exits and other exits had been locked. Dozens of people died around the exits in desperation in a town of around 2,000. Our state suppressed the investigation, due to lobbies, and families received almost none of the compensation funds. Pretty sure there's a song about it. My mom told me this story once that back when she was growing up in a small farming community in Ohio, there was some kind of neighborhood party attended by a bunch of families with kids all around the same age. All the kids, including herself, had this like big slumber party in the basement. They wake up the next morning and one of the kids is found in the middle of the road, having been hit with a truck, but with his whole body zipped all the way up in his sleeping bag. None of the kids owned up to doing it. The adults could never figure it out either. After a while people just started moving on with their lives and everyone pretty much forgot about it. I wouldn't say we live in a secluded town, but when my mother was in school her best friend got a job working for the sheriff. She later came to school and told them that the sheriff had been molesting her. She also began telling people about what they have been using the tunnels under the town for. The police supposedly had been filming child pornography. After that day she never made it home. She was found later naked, hog-tied and shot in the back of the head. No one could prove it, and the sheriff had been suspected of many things but nothing ever came of it. They just announced that there was a man seen in a white van abducting people. But her friends knew. Her family knows. This is Red Bluff, California BTW. The tunnels were originally used by Chinese immigrants. They go through our main street and through Rio Street. They lead to houses and some businesses but they have been condemned. There are sensors down there though, so if you get in the police are right there to get you out. Edit. The little girl's name was Rachelle Ward and the sheriff supposedly responsible was Koenig, but he died years back of old age. A cop was a child molester and it was widely known. He went with a group hunting in the woods and never came back. I didn't live there but about 20 minutes away. A farm town in Washington where the Mr. Hands incident occurred. People there still don't acknowledge the event. For the uninitiated, a guy enticed a horse to penetrate him in the butt and inadvertently killed him. Several young boys, aged 9 to 11, went missing in the village and it was suspected that a group of boys from the same school were responsible. They were heard talking about it on 2 occasions, about how they kill whoever they don't like. However, their parents apparently attested that they never let them out of sight outside of school hours. This group of kids was known for skipping school to sniff glue and drink alcohol BTW, but their parents obviously denied it. Only one of the 6 missing kids was ever found, in a creek, with injuries like he was stoned to death. Police said he fell down the creek accidentally, though. This was about 20 years ago in Europe BTW. Nothing with me, but when my mom was a kid she lived near a state park in New Hampshire. It's called Bear Brook. In the 80s multiple dismembered body parts were found in a blue barrel. An investigation happened but the killer was never found. In the early 00s another barrel was found, dating back to the time of the first barrel. The killer was recently found. His name was Robert Evans. The park is in Allenstown if you want to look it up. It's still happening in my town. This specific event happened directly in my gated neighborhood. A member of a Russian gang got his house shot up before they went inside to finish the job. My wife saw them drag out the body. Organized crime bosses live in my town and the 2 neighboring towns. In the 80s and early 90s my town was run completely by dirty cops. Drugs were run by the cops and people who didn't do as they were told would go mysteriously missing and eventually, most of them, wind up dead. It took the feds to clean the place up and install a new set of clean cops. The CEO of our town's electric company beats his wife regularly. He ended up getting arrested for domestic violence and his beatings were pretty horrific. Everyone knows what a shithead he is. In the end he got a good lawyer and the police let him off the hook. No jail time, no fines, nothing. Fuck him. When my mom was growing up, a teacher and his wife were killed by an axe murderer. Someone broke into their house and killed them in the middle of the night. They found the husband in the house and the wife in the woods behind it, indicating that she tried to escape and was chased down. Really gruesome stuff. The attack was seemingly random, and they never caught the person responsible. My elementary school was named after the teacher, which wouldn't necessarily be morbid except for the fact that there was a dedication plaque that mentioned his murder. In an elementary school. The 90s were fucking wild. Probably that old guy who had like 8 children, sexually assaulted 2 of his daughters, raped his stepdaughter multiple times, getting her pregnant and completely mentally impaired in the process, also mentally and physically abusing the rest of his family, letting one of his sons die from pneumonia because he refused him any treatment and in the end tried to force his wife to buy him the way out of prison. Ask anyone outside of my town and they will have never heard of him, but I remember him pretty clearly since I was also friends with one of his sons my age and almost the entirety of the rest of the family. I was at their house pretty often when I was younger until my parents forbid me from going there again. Because how I later found out around that time the first accusations became public since one of his daughters had moved out and reported everything to the police. A family friend was super drunk. He was walking home and fell unconscious on the road at the bottom of a hill. Another family friend, small town so we all knew each other, was driving home late. He heard a thump and a crunch when he went over a hill. He got out of the car thinking he hit a wallaby or something. He instead found his friend dead. Everyone decided to forget what he did, because it really wasn't his fault. There was no way he could have seen him asleep at the bottom on the hill in the middle of the road. It was at such an angle that the headlights didn't spot him. It's a bit weird this has come up because I drove past a super drunk dude just a few hours ago on my way home from work. He was drunk and stumbling on the road. He fell over and lost a thong. Flip-flop to you Americans. I called the police and told them. They said they'd pick him up and take him home where he would be safe. Didn't want a repeat of what happened back in my hometown to happen to that random drunk guy. My town isn't very secluded, but I think this still works. So there is this building that used to be a hotel and one day this guy shows up and he takes multiple trips going in and out with a bunch of equipment. They found him a little while later in his room. He had assembled an entire guillotine and cut his head off. Small town of about 2,000 to 2,500 in the Midwest, when suddenly about 1/4 of the population just up and left. No word, no nothing. None of them had kids or extended family and none of the papers said anything about it. This was back in maybe the late 80s. This happened when I was pretty young, but I just remember one day one of my teachers wasn't there and I found out from my parents a ton of people had just left overnight. Most personal belongings were taken with them, but mattresses and furniture was still in their houses. I still have no clue what that was about, and when I've asked my parents more recently they said the rumor around town was that all those people worked for the CIA or FBI and were reassigned all of a sudden. Over the summer there was a guy found hanging from a tree on the sheriff's property. The sheriff disliked this young man and treated him poorly during his incarceration at the county jail. Many witnesses said that the day he got released from jail, the sheriff invited him to his secluded property and told him he could help him get back on his feet. 2 days later, a couple of teenage boys fishing in a creek discovered the guy hanging in a tree. Authorities was notified, no investigation was done, and it was immediately ruled a suicide. This boy was a known drug addict with no family or friends, so there was really no one to press the issue. The local news wrote a small article and man found dead from apparent suicide, and then it was hush-hush after that. It's just one of those things we will never know. The doctor who tried all these wacky treatments to save his young patient from tuberculosis and became infatuated with her. After she died he eventually robbed her grave, mummified her and lived with her body for 7 years before being found out. Did not go to jail and lived his years out in town, I believe. Well, we had the 32-year-old son of a prominent member of town rape and sodomize a 14-year-old girl. Notable quotes from the kangaroo court: "She was begging for it. You see the tits on that one, how was I supposed to know? She didn't try real hard to stop anything." Anyways, he got off with a slap on the wrist. 2 weeks later, he was found by cleaning staff in the local gym, beaten with a wooden broom handle shoved up his ass. Rumor was that it was a group of guys from the high school that jumped him after another chick lured him there. Honestly, a lot of people know who did it, but no one breathed a word. He survived, but left the area and basically just disappeared.